A bit of a hard start, I guess, but in today's lab what we're doing is looking at the percent composition of magnesium oxide. So what we're going to need is we're going to need a balance and we're going to need some equipment. So one of the things is a crucible and lid. You've already used the crucible lid before. This is the crucible that goes with it. We're going to need a piece of magnesium. We're going to need some crucible tongs. We're going to need a clay triangle and a Bunsen burner and an iron ring on a stand, which is over here. There are going to be three masses that we take, and then there's going to be some masses that we calculate. Three masses that we are going to take are here on the board. See if we can zoom in a little bit. So we're going to need a crucible and lid when they're empty. Then we're going to put some magnesium in it, find the mass again, and then we are going to do some chemistry, and when it's all done we'll find the mass again a third time. Alright, so we've got a properly zeroed balance. As you know, it never wants to stay at zero. We'll try that again. Crucible and lid, which is empty, goes on the balance. And I have a reading of 38.760, so 38.760. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to add the magnesium. So I've got a piece of magnesium. I cleaned it before with steel wool. I'm going to fold that up and put it in the bottom. I can tear it up if I want to. All I really need to do is make sure that it fits in there. All the bits go in, into the bottom. Put that on the balance again. And I have 38.974. So I got the crucible and lid with the magnesium in it on a clay triangle, which is sitting on an iron ring. I actually want the crucible tipped over just a little bit. I mean, I can tip it over more if I want. The reason I want it tipped over a little bit is so that as things get hot and they start to expand, I don't want to cause any problems with the crucible. So I like to have the lid upside down so that the lid handle, I guess, can be used as a stop so it doesn't fall off. So at this point it's fairly stable. It's not going to be going anywhere. I want the hottest flame I can get, so I'm going to want to open up the gas, and then of course I'm going to want to open up the air, and I want that good strong flame. At this point it's a waiting game, although every once in a while I'm going to be taking the lid off the crucible so that we can see how the reaction is progressing. So I'm just going to be doing this with the crucible tongs. I'm going to lift the lid off and put the lid back on. Sometimes it's just to check, sometimes it's to get another fresh blast of oxygen in, because I'm reacting magnesium with oxygen and it's the oxygen from the air. So at this point I'm going to stop talking, and then it's just a matter of waiting. The lid, you see it's glowing in there, and then perhaps some smoke is coming in. So that smoke is actually the magnesium oxide ash that we want to keep. The glowing is the magnesium fire. Now I want to do that a couple of times to keep getting the air in there, because as now the reaction is progressing, I want to keep feeding it oxygen. I don't want to lose any smoke though, because it is the solid that I'm trying to keep and find the mass of eventually. But take the lid off, put the lid back on. It is done, step one. I'm going to put my stirring rod over here very carefully. I want to make sure that I keep all of the powder, don't lose any of it. And we want to at least talk about step two while that's cooling down. So step two is going to be over here. So as I react the magnesium with oxygen, there's also nitrogen in the air, and the nitrogen is going to react with the magnesium as well, a little tiny bit. So in that crucible right now I have magnesium oxide, which I want, and I also have some magnesium nitride, which I don't want. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to let it cool down for a little bit, and then I'm going to add some water. It really doesn't matter a whole lot how much water I add. I'm going to add about 10 milliliters, and then I'm going to heat it up. I'm going to heat it gently at first because I want to boil off the water, and then once the water, and that's going to be reaction number 2, I'm going to boil off the water, or the excess water, because some of the water will react to form magnesium oxide, hydroxide rather, and ammonia, and then some of the water will just be left over. And then I'm going to take the magnesium hydroxide in the third reaction there, and I'm just going to heat it up good and strong for about 6 to 10 minutes. Okay, so right now we're just going to let the crucible cool. So the crucible and powder has had time to cool, so I'm going to add about 10 mils of water. I don't have to measure it. I don't have to know how much water I put in, and I'm certainly not going to take a mass of it right now. I'm also going to stir it just a little bit with my stirring rod to kind of basically wash off the powder that was on there. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to basically put it back onto the crucible now, onto the clay triangle. Now I want it to be a little bit more upright because as I don't want the water to slosh out. I'm going to put the Bunsen burner back under, and this time I want to control the heat. So it's still going to be, I'm going to turn the heat down just a little bit. I want to boil the water off, so it needs to get hot, but 10 mils of water is going to heat up and start to boil quite quickly. So what I'm going to end up doing is I'm going to be moving the Bunsen burner out and then back under so that I can control the boil. I don't want anything splashing out. I don't want it to boil over. I just want it to heat the water and boil the water off. So I'm just going to very carefully and consistently control the boil by moving the Bunsen burner in and out. Okay, and at that point I can stop talking and start doing. Alright, so at this point the water has pretty much boiled off. I'm going to put that down so I can pick this up and show it to you. I don't know how well you can see it, but the water's pretty much boiled off. There's still a little bit of residue in there, or a little bit of moisture in there. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the lid back on, and right now we just want to heat it, and we're going to heat it fairly strongly. Now that the water's all gone, there's no risk of boiling over, so I can just turn the heat up as high as it can go safely and let it cook for about 6-10 minutes, something like that. So we're going to let that, and then afterwards I'm going to take it off and I'm going to let it cool. So we'll pick it up when the next part is important, and that's after it's done cooling off. Alright, so everything is properly cooled off now, and all that's left is to take our final mass. So we heated it, we drove off the water, we cooked it again to get rid of or convert the magnesium nitride to magnesium hydroxide, and then convert the magnesium hydroxide to magnesium oxide. Now all that's left is to take my crucible lid and the contents, which is the ash, which should now all be magnesium oxide, and find the mass of that. And I'm getting a mass there of 39.083 grams, which leaves me with a final data table up here. Let me just zoom in a little bit of that. So those three masses. From there, we're going to calculate the mass of magnesium. We're going to calculate the mass of magnesium oxide, and that's simply just a matter of subtracting away the crucible and lid. I also need to find the mass of oxygen. And you'll notice going from the crucible lid and magnesium to crucible lid magnesium oxide, the mass went up a little bit, and that's the mass of oxygen that got in to the system, to the crucible, while I was heating it the very, very first time around. Now, yes, I probably did lose a tiny little bit of mass to smoke or to splatter a little bit later on in the lab, but overall, those losses shouldn't be very much, and then that's what we call experimental error. So we'll talking a little bit later about what to do with the data.